So is this the best wood stove ever made? Stay around. Let's take a look. Okay, so continuing in our series on twig stoves, I brought out today a little wood gasification stove. Now before I start showing you this stove at all, I just want to do something I failed to do in my last video. In the last video we talked about the Emberlit stove versus the little dandy wood stove. And what I had forgot to say is something that has been on my mind since I started this series, which is the equipment that you carry with you in the woods should be to enhance your enjoyment and your experience of being in the woods. Being out in the woods should not be about the equipment. It should be about building your skills and your knowledge. Don't focus on the equipment. Having said that, it's always good to give thought to the gear that we take out, and that's one of the things I want to do with this series on small twig stoves, is talk about the pros and cons and show you a couple different types that I have. So this one, wood gasification. This one is branded Lixada. It is from China. I bought it on eBay for about $18 Canadian, and that's the reason I bought this one, is because it was so inexpensive. There's no question that it is a direct copy, probably a patent infringement on the Silver Fire Scout model wood gasification stove. It does have some differences from that one and elements borrowed from another stove. And specifically that is the top ring burner and the pot stand. I'll show you a little bit more detail in a few minutes time, but most of these wood gasification stoves have a different pot stand on top, one that has little fold out arms such as the original Silver Fire Scout had. This one is very reminiscent, if not identical, to the one that's used on top of the Solo wood stove, which of course in itself is a copy of the Canadian made Bush Buddy stove. And this is not a comparison or review of those two stoves. They're both very good looking stoves, appear to be very functional stove. They're also much more expensive than this one, and as is the Silver Fire Scout, which is the reason I bought this. And I thought I had no illusions that this would be the same quality as the other one when I bought it, but I thought it would give me an indication of what a wood gasification stove worked like and whether it was something I wanted to carry. Now there is another reason I bought this one, and it seems a little backwards, but you'll see what I mean. So I had previously purchased the 775 milliliter helicopter overhead. Sorry about that, folks. The search and rescue helicopter has been going overhead a couple of times already. I don't think they're actually looking to do an actual rescue. I think it's more of a training exercise, but they're flying quite low to the treetop and very loud, and just seems to be the way of it. Just as you're recording a video, then the helicopters fly over. Oh well. Anyway, as I was saying, I had previously purchased the MSR Seagull stowaway pot. I bought this at Mountain Equipment Co-op. It was really very inexpensive. This is the 775 milliliter version. It's quite a small stove, and I wanted this one because 775 milliliters is just over 3 cups of water, and that seems to be the perfect size for making a meal for one person, possibly even 2 people. It's roughly the same volume as the military canteen cup is, so that's the reason I had bought this, and I could not be happier. It is a tremendous little piece of equipment. Then I discovered one day, looking through videos and watching reviews on the internet, that the Silver Fire Scout was designed to drop directly into this stove when it's disassembled. And I'll explain what that is in a second. And I wondered if the clone stoves from China would do exactly the same thing. So I made some measurements and looked on the internet, on the eBay, and the measurements seemed to be the same. So I bought it on speculation, and lo and behold, it does. So I'm going to disassemble the stove, put it inside of this pot, take it out and put it back together for you to see just how compact they are. So it's part of the reason I bought it, strangely enough, is to to store inside of this stove and make it a more compact carry. Okay, stay with me. Okay, so here we go. There's my fully loaded MSR stowaway pot, 775 milliliter. Stuff sack that I made to go with it. And again, I'll explain what this little plate is in a minute. But inside of here, the stove rests nicely and it takes up most of the space. So I'll just show you how this comes apart and how it sets up. Cover aside, pot stand, outer ring for the stove, inner two rings or inner part of the stove, pot stand on top, and it's ready to go. So that's not bad. It works. It sets up very quickly and fits and goes away just as nicely inside of the stove. Now, what is this and what is it for? Well, this is a piece of aluminum flashing, and I cut it to fit inside of the pot. One of the differences between this stove by Lixada and the Silverfire Scout is that there's no built-in ash pan as there is with the Silverfire Scout. So on the bottom, where the airflow goes through, there is a risk of ashes falling through, right through to the earth. So all I need to do is lay my piece of aluminum down, lay the bottom piece over it. Any ashes that fall through now will fall on that piece of aluminum flashing, and the ground is protected and the woods are protected from fire. So I'm going to set this up and I'm going to cook my lunch on it, and I'll show you it in action in a few minutes' time. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what this stove works like. Alright, so just before we get started, what I've done is I have pre-loaded the stove with a lot of small sticks. There's even a couple of pine cones in there, a little bit of birch bark on top. I've got some shavings here that I'm going to add when it gets going, and I'm going to go for a top-down burn. And all that does is it allows, rather than having to start the fire in the bottom and feeding sticks, I can start it and just wait for it to burn down through. It'll generate some embers and some coals and get a good base going, and then I'll be able to put my pot stand on top of it after it gets going. So as it starts up, I'm going to talk a little bit about wood stoves some more. Let the birch bark catch. Now as that starts to catch and burn down into the main fuel, as I mentioned early on, one of the advantages of these stick stoves or twig stoves is that you don't have to carry fuel with you. You can just pick up some sticks along the trail and you've got a fire. You don't have to do a lot of wood processing to get a fire that will cook. You just need to find small sticks. So those are the advantages of them. But those advantages can also be a disadvantage in that now today, beautiful day. It started off at 4 degrees today and running about 10 degrees Celsius right now. So it's a beautiful day, but on another day it might be a lot wetter. And if the wood is wet and you're picking twigs up off of the forest floor, there's a good chance that those twigs are going to have a hard time igniting, because these stoves are not big enough, usually not big enough, to reach a critical mass as a larger fire in a pit would do, to get the wood to dry out and then start igniting. So sometimes you get a lot of work getting them going, but the advantages in most cases outweigh the disadvantages. And if it's one of those situations where it's a day that is too wet to get one of these things working effectively, well, you can always go back to using a regular fire in a fireplace or on the ground in a safe area. But what I really like about these things is that they're quick, they're efficient, they leave virtually no trace that you've been there. And the wood gasification stove especially, once it starts to get into the gasifying stage, and I'm going to point that out when we do get to it, they have very little smoke. Even now you can see there's not a lot of smoke being generated by this fire. So as it burns down, I'll bring you back and I get my lunch on it, and we'll go from there. So I've got my MSR pot full, just short of the top, so probably about 750 mils or 3 cups. And I'll need most of that for my lunch today. It hasn't come to a boil yet, but I thought what I'd do is just take a second to show you the gasification process in action. By the way, this is one of the things I like about these MSR pots, is that the handle almost invariably stays cool if you're not too far into the fire. So I'll take that out and put it aside. And if you look down inside, it's going to look as if there's jets of fire coming in from the side of the stove, but in fact what's happening is the air that's being drawn in through the bottom and up through, it's a double wall design, so up through the wall is being heated as it goes, and then it will re-enter the burn chamber at the top. And because it's warm air mixing with, or hot air actually, mixing with the unburnt wood particles that would otherwise be smoke, they get a chance to reignite, so it's burning twice, an afterburner if you will. So that wood gas is being lit at the top. So you get much less smoke, much more efficient burn, much more heat for the same amount of wood. And as you can see, this is producing very little, almost no smoke. And it seems to be coming up in a jet formation, which brings my water to a boil very quickly. But as with all small stoves, you got to keep a small supply, or actually a steady supply of small sticks handy. One disadvantage of this stove over, say, the Emberlit is the fact that you do have to process your wood down into much smaller pieces. And that's okay if you have a supply of small sticks handy. If not, you're going to be doing a bit of work chopping them up, splitting them, and making small sticks out of them. But that's not a problem for the most part. You can just usually break off what you need from tree limbs along the way. Small sticks work just fine for this, and if they're up off the ground, of course, there's a better chance of them being dry. So this is working very well, and you can see why I like this design specifically for feeding sticks in. I'll put my pot back on. So with this open port design, I can literally just drop sticks in without having to take the pot off. Okay, I'm going to continue to let this heat up my water, and I'm going to make some lunch. Oh yeah, there's a hard boil. That looks good. I'll take that off. See the wood gasification stove working beautifully there. I'm going to be having some coffee, so I'll continue to feed anything I find along the way here that'll work into it. Even if it's a little damp at this point, it's got a good foundation of coals in there, and it won't go out. It'll dry off the little sticks, and I'll have a pot of hot water ready for coffee. So I'm kind of cheating today. I had these Backpackers pantry meals sitting on my shelves, and I noticed that the best before date was coming due, and yeah, they'll probably last quite a bit past that, but I thought it'd be a good day to try one of these things out. I haven't had one for a while. Today is pasta vegetable parmesan. It looks pretty good, smells pretty good. Calls for 2 cups of water. So I have a little bit more than 2 cups of water in my pot. I've actually got 3 cups of water, so I'll very carefully pour in about 2/3 of this. Take my spoon out. Try not to burn myself. There. Looks to be about the right amount. Just covering over the top of the noodles. Brought a long-handled wood spoon today to be able to reach down. It's barely long enough. I think maybe I'll add a tiny bit more water. Cover the noodles up. Yeah, that should do it. Zip that closed. Now I have a cozy made for bags like this, made out of Reflectix. I was going to bring it today, but Lord, it's got to be close to 15 degrees Celsius now. Probably too warm to eat a meal like this, but I've got it, I've made it, I'm going to try it out. When it gets cold, I can use the cozy another time. Alright, I'm going to enjoy my meal and a cup of coffee, and I'll bring you back when there's something interesting to see. Okay, so I'm finished lunch, and I'm about to put my cooking set away. Cools off very quickly, and that's one of the nice things about it. Very little ash if you let it burn down and burn out by itself. So here it is, all disassembled, all the component parts of everything I carry. And one additional thing, my Trangia stove, or my knockoff Trangia stove by Elox. I wanted to show you this as well. It's kind of cool. If you take the Trangia and you drop it into the center of the pot stand, you've got an impromptu pot stand for your Trangias. And it's about 1 inch and maybe just a little more to the top of the pot stand itself. So you've got almost that sweet spot, that magical spot where you get the most efficiency from your stove. Might be just a little short of that. That doesn't stop it from working. It means maybe that it will just be a little slower bringing water to a boil. Usually the taller the pot stand off of the stove, off of the trangia, the quicker it'll come to the boil. But one of the other things I also like about this arrangement is I can use the simmer ring through the opening in the port. So now I've got a controlled simmer and I can bring a pot of water to a boil. So why would I even do this? Well, sometimes you're getting to a place where you're ready to set up and have some lunch. It's raining, you just want to have a hot cup of coffee. You don't want to go through all the work of gathering some small wood and birch bark or whatever it is you're going to ignite your wood with to get a fire going. You can very quickly dig out your trangia, drop it into the center of the pot stand, or the pot stand, and then you can boil some water up very quickly. Now I'm going to put this together in the pot just to show you how quickly it assembles. But before I do, I just wanted to give you another look at the stove and its components. So this is the base ring where the air would go through. This is the center part of the stove, and you can see here the double wall design which allows air to come up through between the two walls, heat it up, and then ports out through those holes at the top there. So, and here is the tray itself that holds the wood. So the easiest way for me to assemble this is to drop it in, drop it in, drop it in, and drop it in. And let's just see if I can get the trangia to go in there as well. Bum. Everything, all in one. Maybe not enough room for your fuel for the trangia, but you can carry that separately. Personally, I don't think I'd want mine to leak out of my cooking pot anyway. It doesn't taste very good with the food. So all I have to do now, I failed to put that in the bottom, but it will also fit in the top, that little ash pan. Close the top over, and I'm ready to go. There you go. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, the third in my series on small twig stoves. This one also is a purchase. It's not a DIY stove, but as you can see, it's got a lot of advantages going for it. It's small and compact. What I didn't mention was the weight. So the stove itself, without the pot, weighs in at 13 ounces. That's just 2 more ounces than the ember lid, so not a huge weight increase. It is a little less compact than the ember lid is, but it's a lot easier to set up and a lot easier to use in many ways. It just requires a steady supply of small twigs to get it going. But there's very little ash left over and very little smoke generated during the process. So I wanted to try a gasification stove, and I'm quite happy I did. This is something that I'll take along quite often, probably because it's so easy to set up. It's one of the reasons I like taking it. And it packs so well in that little MSR Seagull stowaway pot, and which makes for a great combination. So I have one more stove in the series. I'm going to call it the Ultimate Stick Stove. I'll bring that to you on a future outing. But if you've enjoyed this short series on stick stoves and twig stoves, or any of my other videos, why don't you subscribe to my channel? That just encourages me to produce more videos, and if you like them that much, share them with your friends, and hit the like button, of course, and by all means, leave comments below. What kind of stove do you have? What kind of stove do you think is the best stick stove? I guess the question I posed in the beginning was, is this the ultimate stick stove? I don't know. I don't know what the ultimate stick stove is. I haven't tried all the ones out there. The Bush Box XL from Bushcraft Essentials looks awfully good, but expensive, very expensive, at least here in Canada. The Firebox stove looks really good, less than half the price of the Bush Box XL. Hopefully that's the one I get to try next. But there are other designs. There's a lot of different designs out there. So I don't know which one you would call essential, or the best, or the ultimate stove. Maybe there isn't such a thing as the ultimate stove. Personally, right now, of all the stoves that I have, if you weigh in the factors of cost, effectiveness, and weight, I'd have to say it's the IKEA Hobo stove. The one disadvantage to that stove, of course, is its bulk. But if you can get it so that it fits inside of a pot, or a pot fits inside of it, then you've lessened the room that's going to take up in your pack. So once again, see you on the trail. Get out and explore. And by all means, take the path less traveled. It'll make all the difference. Bye for now.